and welcome to the Group Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Neal Goldstein. Today, it is my honor and privilege to have as my guest on the podcast the esteemed and nationally recognized orthopedic surgeon who founded Illinois Bone and Joint Institute, my brother, Dr. Wayne Goldstein. As I mentioned in the premiere of this podcast, IBJI started out in 1991 with 4 surgeons in one location. And over the past 35 years, it has grown to 160 doctors at 40 locations and has become a true and robust musculoskeletal multi-subspecialty practice. This phenomenal growth and success is due in no small part to Wayne's vision and his leadership. Wayne, thank you for joining me on Group Practice.
Good. Nice to be here.
So I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask you. And the first is that in the premiere of this podcast, I talked about the event which led to the founding of Illinois Bone and Joint, which was the split that you had with your partner who was a spine surgeon.
Right.
But I'd like the listeners to hear about your educational and professional background leading up to the founding of IBJI. So tell the listeners your background, and let's start with college.
Okay. Well, I'm a graduate of University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And after that, I went on to medical school at University of Illinois at Chicago, now called UIC, and then after that, I became a resident at the University of Illinois Cook County Residency Program in Orthopedics. And after that, I was invited to do a fellowship at Harvard at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And that led me to begin practice. While I was a resident, the spine surgeon invited me to come into practice at Lutheran General, and I applied. In the meantime, I was blocked by all the orthopedic surgeons there, partly because nobody really had done a fellowship and everybody were general orthopedists. And though I could do general orthopedics, I specialized in joint replacement in a very prestigious program in the United States. And I also worked with a guy in Highland Park who was a general orthopedist. And I also worked part-time at the Veterans Hospital and at the University of Illinois because at that point I had 2 children and I had to make a living. And then eventually, about 10 months after starting that, I got the medical staff at Lutheran General Hospital was overruled by the board of directors, and I was appointed to the medical staff. The reason that they tried to block me was they didn't feel that I I needed to be there, and they were concerned that with a specialty in total joint replacement, which could be lucrative, that I would take over the place. So that began my days as basically a partner of a spine surgeon who had nothing to do with my practice except in the administrative part. And little by little, after 5 years and taking call every other night for 5 years, I started hiring each one of my residents, which were originally from Northwestern University.
Okay. And I've always said that the concerns that those doctors had about you taking over the place were well-founded because you had a very successful career there.
Yeah.
At the end, with you being the chairman of orthopedics at
Yes.
Lutheran General, where they actually created orthopedics used to be a division, right?
Division of general surgery, and then
And they created a separate department, and you were the
right.
first chair of that department. So
And all the remaining doctors who were, well, the older guys were mostly retired, but they all ended up in my practice, Illinois Bone and Joint Institute, to this very day.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you weren't out to conquer or to hurt their practices. Your attitude, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, was there's a rising tide here. There's an opportunity for a rising tide where everybody will benefit. So when I
Right.
say their fears were well-founded, yes, you did and have an incredibly successful run at Lutheran, but it's not like their practices suffered for it. Lutheran benefited from it, and so they all benefited from it. So there's a
Right.
really good lesson there that
I made the orthopedic care better, and then we branched out to other things as well.
right. Okay, so I've always believed that one of the things that drove you to create this orthopedic large group, this empire, was how hospitals treated orthopedic surgeons. Really kind of took them for granted. There were the IPAs and the rules within the hospital that seemed to be dictated not by the surgeons who were actually doing the surgery, but by other physicians, primary care or otherwise. But there was sort of that general feeling of that you weren't going to cast your lot to be an employee of the hospital, that you felt that it should be independent. But is there anything that I'm missing, or was there anything in particular that drove you to this, or does that kind of sum it up?
It does, but part of it is that insurance companies, particularly when we had the managed care with the Independent Physician Association, IPA, it was each specialist got so many dollars per member per month. And also, there was a drive to cut the costs of orthopedics. And that meant lowering the length of stay. That meant using less expensive and probably inferior implants. And also, there was a bottleneck in the operating rooms where we just didn't have enough staff or rooms to be able to accommodate doctors with growing careers. And all that mix, I realized that I had to make it better. I needed better surgical nurses than the hospital would provide. I needed better equipment. I mean, originally we had saws that were connected to pneumatic tubes, where now they're cordless. But it also had to do with the care. I set up algorithms to make sure that on this day we would do this day, and also prepared the patients for their time in the hospital in the elective point. When it came to trauma, you do the best you can because you have no warning what's coming. But we eventually were able to manage this. And believe it or not, having trained at Cook County Hospital and University of Illinois, I was very well trained in pediatric orthopedics and microsurgery of the hand. Because in my day, we had to learn everything. My first year in residency was purely general surgery, where I took care of sick patients, wounded people, appendicitis. I think I did 30 hernias, about five cholecystectomy, removing the gallbladder, all of that, and managed the patients in the intensive care unit. Something it's unthinkable today, but yeah, we had to learn it. And babies that were born with hip dysplasia, their hips weren't in the socket. We knew how to take care of that, and that wasn't common in all the doctors, some of them. But I will. I wanted to learn everything I could about everything, and I also wanted to learn about everything about the business of orthopedics, which is why I had a front seat to Lutheran General's management of the doctors. I was the director of the orthopedic division eventually before I was chairman. And also, I was very involved in the education of the residents that came from Northwestern, and many of them to this day are still my partners.
Yeah. So you made incredible contributions to Lutheran, including Lutheran's level one trauma center, but really didn't have an orthopedic trauma service to speak of.
Right?
And then you came along, taking call every other night, really
Yeah.
taking these complex cases that had nothing to do with joint replacement. Well, I hope that we'll have other episodes where we can talk
Hmm.
about some of your war stories of that experience. But unfortunately, that particular hospital, and I think a lot of hospitals, really just kind of looked at that as saying, well, he's got the privilege of being on staff at our hospital, and the privilege is sort of the I don't want to say compensation, but we're giving him the privileges. We want the doctors to do everything else, and that never sat well with you because you saw the reality.
Yeah.
Um, it, as I look at IBJI, which is now 35 years in October, I think is the anniversary, I can point to three decisions that you made early on, which were key to IBJI's success. And I'd like to talk to you about those decisions. The first was you absolutely refused to have non-competes on any of your doctors. I thought you were crazy for that. The lawyer who was really my supervisor training me said that's very odd. There was actually a case that had come out recently upholding non-competes, and you said no, you refused. Tell us why.
Well, the reason I did that is that in our organization, we had around us the best of the best doctors, meaning that if there was a screw up or something that you were not sure of, you always had the backing of the other doctors. Um, we owned a billing company and didn't rely on other people to bill for us. And I knew that if you cannot collect the money that you bill, you eventually would fold up. So that was really an important part of creating the group. And I just think that and it had to do with the income of the individual doctors. If they, most of the groups that folded up or split apart, it was always about money. And my basically what I said is, if you think that you can do better outside this group, go on, try it. Because I knew they couldn't. There were just these things that were intangible. But it was the point is that we were better educated and we kept up to date on everything. And then I realized that every one of the people in the group had done fellowships now that I required. So if it was a hand surgeon, you'd be a hand surgeon. And if you were sports medicine, spine is spine. And when Lutheran General wanted to get in on owning their own orthopedic surgeon in their group, I would simply say, which kind of orthopedic surgeon are you going to hire? And they go, what do you mean? Like you? I go, well, I'm a joint replacement surgeon. I do other things, but for the most part, Dr. Paddock is sports medicine, and he's an expert in arthroscopic surgery, and he's an expert shoulder surgeon. In hand, I started the hand call, but I said, are you going to do a hand surgeon? Because a lot of the hand surgeons are plastic surgeons. Do you really think that they will be able to take call at night and take care of trauma, or as I have in my career, a firecracker like an M80 blowing up in their hand? Do you think that somebody who's a general orthopedic surgeon would be worthy? Because we want to keep these patients at our hospital. We don't want them to be transferred to a tertiary center. And basically, I made Lutheran a tertiary center for everything. So it's very hard to compete.
But all of that, uh, that vision that you had about it would would not have been able to, it wouldn't have happened if there were non-competes on the doctors who were joining you, because they had non-competes when they were splitting up, and that was when you were, forming Illinois Bone and Joint. So there was
Right.
a lot of tension there. Um, and one of the things you used to say that I loved was, um, when Advocate Lutheran, whomever, would say that they, might hire someone from your group, your answer was go for it.
Yeah.
And it was always like, if you can find a better arrangement than what they have at IBJI, they should go for it. I also think, the experience that you had about getting blocked from Lutheran, I think that had to have an effect on you too, because there were two things that were so fundamentally wrong with that. The first was you were preventing a doctor from making a living. But worse than that, you were depriving patients of the best and the brightest, not just you, but others.
Right.
And what's interesting is now today, non-competes are becoming harder and harder to enforce. And here you were 35 years ago saying, you really don't need them. It's actually not it's not a good incentive for someone to stay. And over the course of those 35 years, very, very few, I can probably count on my hand the number of doctors who left to join a competing group. So you really you
Right.
proved the concept there, which was really incredible. The next question and the second thing that I saw, and it's sort of related to the non-compete, was that you never wanted to make money off of other doctors.
Right.
Um, and and I look at some of those contracts from back then. You had partners that you had doctors who were eligible for partnership in 2 years, which was on the short end. Some of them you made them partners right away. You weren't looking to make a profit off of them.
Right.
You for them to grow into partnership so that they could stand with you side by side. What influenced you there? Why was that so important to you?
Well, I knew that, and remember, Chicago orthopedics, it was sort of a tight group. And I knew people left and that because they said these senior guys are making a fortune off of me and they hardly even work or they don't take call. And so it was sort of a thing where I set it up such that you did not make money off of younger people. And as you got older, if you slowed down in the surgery, you would get paid less. And I would incentivize the younger people. I said, if you can work harder than me and make more money than me, do it. It's admirable. I'll help you do it. And that's the whole point. It's not being miserly. I just wanted them to be trained to realize that I was going to empower them to be the best orthopedic surgeons they can be. And if they really worked hard, and people in trauma or people in pediatrics, they see a lot of patients more than I could. And I wanted to reward them. And it stimulated them to work harder. And then the subsequent generations that came in, they knew that if they worked hard, they would get rewarded. They wouldn't be salaried. Those that left our group, and there were very few that ever left our group, it had to do more with they just didn't want to work that hard. Particularly now, the younger people say, "Well, we want work-life balance." I go, "If there was work-life balance, I never would be where I am." And the generation after me, same thing. Everybody wanted to work hard. Uh, and it's a interesting life. Orthopedics was in the growth phase intellectually when I started, and all the new devices. Now they talk about robotics and all that, but what I was intending on doing is cultivate a master surgeon, somebody that was so good at what he did, no robot could ever replace him, and there's no medication that could replace them.
Mhm. So that leads to the third thing, the third key decision, which was you were never afraid to hire the best and brightest, even if there wasn't a specific need. So, for example, when IBJI started, you had Bob Paddock, who was the sports surgeon, played football from Michigan, wonderful surgeon, wonderful guy. Um, but you also had another sports surgeon too.
Right,
And of course, doctors are going to be concerned about, well, is that going to take anything away from me? Is it going to affect my business? And your attitude was always plow forward and just work hard and
right,
good, good work begets, more patients. And so I think that was the fact that when you look at the early years and you hire what the sports guy, hand, pediatric, spine, trauma,
right.
what am I missing? Foot and ankle.
Foot and
And
ankle.
you just weren't afraid of doing that. You
Right,
continued to hire. And that's not easy to do. It wasn't easy back then. And it's certainly not easy now, especially in private practice when you're competing with the hospitals and everything. But it is so key because you look at some of these people that you hired, they were your residents. You hired them out of fellowship. They had great careers because you were able to find the best and the brightest,
right.
and
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 they
they did
work
very
with me.
well.
Yeah. But I think the thing is, no group goes bad if you get an exceptional doctor. And I think our father would say that if you have a person who's absolutely bright, who can actually create or contribute, hire them. They won't suck you dry. People have a idea that, oh, Chicago is, just a small city, the second city, but the greater Chicago metropolitan area is over 9 million people. And there's no way that we can't thrive. Years ago, we used to want to be in their communities, but for a good doctor, people will travel. And, you know, today it's so different with computers and telephones, but people still travel from Wisconsin, Indiana to us, and they know our brand. In the Illinois Bone and Joint Institute is very well known, so that even people who work for the competitive institutions who are employed by in Chicago, Endeavor, Advocate, their employees go to Illinois Bone and Joint
Right.
because they know we're better. And in addition, the service, we have what's called ortho access. So if you need to see a doctor, you don't have to wait 2 months. And if you're in terrible pain, you could just walk in and we'll see, we'll see how much pain you are, how serious it is, and potentially you'll go ahead of everybody else because we
Oh,
triage our patients, and that has been huge, such that the insurance companies pay us more for that kind of visit than a normal visit,
and you avoid the emergency room. You're
which
in,
is
no,
which is a 6 to 8 hour experience
right,
where you can just walk in and you'll be out in about 1 hour,
right.
done
At the worst.
X-rays and diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to be creative
Yeah.
and
Yes.
innovative.
Which which you very much have. And so Wayne's son, Jeffrey, my nephew, is a joint replacement doctor leader, a physician leader within Illinois Bone and Joint. And I love hearing him talk about orthopedics in Illinois Bone and Joint because it really sounds like his dad, just really cool to
Mhm.
see what you've done in mentoring and teaching other people and to see it in your own son
Yeah.
is really outstanding. So Oh,
something like people say, "Did you plan this?" As he was growing up and going to an Ivy League school and going for, med school and residency. Did you plan it? Maybe. But it's one of those things. He saw it. He saw I was enthusiastic about it, and he also saw that I was a leader, and I would. Before we had Zoom and computers, I used to have to carry my slides and go all over the country giving lectures with people from Harvard, from Mayo. So it was a good environment, and it, in his generation, it's the next generation. He knows, like a lot of the sons of my colleagues across the country, and some of them know Jeffrey because I gave them their recertification board exams at the Powerhouse every summer.
it's amazing. All right. Well, I have one last question. I'm hoping that you'll join me on future episodes because there's so much about your career that we haven't talked about because we have limited time. But I want to end it with one other question, which is a bit on the light side, but it's a fun story. It's a great story, and it brings a smile on my face every time I think about it, which is that you did the double knee replacement
Yeah,
of our childhood idol, Ernie Banks.
correct.
Tell that story.
So one day I got a phone call, and it was Ernie Banks. One of my patients knew him and gave Ernie my cell phone number. And he called me, and at first I said, "This can't really be Ernie Banks," but it was. And he said, "Dr. Goldstein, would you do my knee replacements?" And I went, "Sure." He goes, "How long do I have to wait and see you?" And I said, "Well, you can come right now, but I'll see you this week." And so he said, "Thank you, Jesus." So he came in, and it was really him, but I hadn't seen him in so many years. But I used to go to Wrigley Field when I was in high school. It was 2L stops away from Sullivan High School. And he was the same person. He was kind, he was nice, and he had a lot of arthritis, more arthritis in the knees. I couldn't believe he was walking around. And I remember when I was a freshman in college in 1971, um, actually, yeah, it was beginning of 71. Leo DeRocher, who was the manager of the 1969 Cubs, was not playing Ernie Banks. And so he was sitting waiting for his wife and his stepdaughter, and all the guys are sitting around, guys from my fraternity. And I said, "How come you don't play Ernie Banks?" And he goes, he's crippled. His knees are terrible.
Hmm.
I can't play him. And yet, then when the reporters ask him, "How you feeling, Ernie?" He goes, "I feel fine." And but he said, but he can't run anymore. And you could see it on the videotape of his 500th home run
Yeah.
when he's rounding the bases. His knees don't straighten out all the way as he does the run. And the amazing thing is that it started from a torn meniscus when he was shortstop for the Cubs, and because he was a black player, he was always worried that Wrigley would fire him. So he never sought treatment for it. They did try him in center field, but he was too slow to be a good fielder. So he went to first base, and he had amazing hands. And sure enough, he became a great first baseman. And then after surgery, I got to know him better. He got to know our family. And Ernie was, I was thinking he had the new Johnson and Johnson DePuy mobile bearing knee. And I said, and I knew he would do well with it. And I thought, maybe since this is launched, this would be a good opportunity for him to actually make appearances at their different meetings or anywhere, and he could talk about it. So I taught him a little bit about the knee replacement. And then he would go on TV in Chicago. All the news stations had him. And sometimes I would have to be on set with him. And sometimes I would talk into an earpiece and give him the answers. But he did get paid to make the appearances. I did not. I didn't care. It was fun being with him, and he taught me a lot about being a baseball player, being a black player. So anyway, the amount of money he was paid for these appearances, and I had nothing to do with the amount. He said to me, he goes, Dr. Wayne, that's the most money I've ever had in my life. I go, what? Aren't you a millionaire? He goes, millionaire? He goes, I never even made $100,000 in my career. I said, I didn't know that. He goes, and being a black player, you had to be careful. Like Lou Brock was on our team and he had a room with me, and the Cubs traded him away for Ernie Broglio, who had a damaged arm. And basically, somebody in the Cubs organization, not the current Ricketts family, they said, one of the people said to Wrigley, listen, we have two black players. We're not the Negro Baseball League. We have to get rid of one of them. And Ernie Banks said, I was a two-time MVP, so they got rid of Brock, who in 1964 took the St. Louis Cardinals to the World Series
Right. It was the worst
and
trade.
solved these bases. So he told me about that. When you're young, we lived in a liberal area. I didn't know from racism.
Right.
And to me, he was better than, any of us.
Right.
But he was always worried about getting cut by the Cubs, which he
Yeah.
never did.
In his surgery, though, because he had it when he was in his 70s, right? Wasn't he
It was in his late 60s.
late
Yeah.
60s? And he
Yeah.
did the double knee, right? Which
Yeah.
didn't even hesitate about it, right? It was kind of like
Well,
Ernie used to say, let's play two today. It's like he
yeah,
said,
let's do
"Hey,
two.
let's do two today."
Yeah, in retrospect, I say to myself, was I crazy to do it? But that is one of the procedures of bilateral knee replacement I perfected. I published on it, so I knew what it would be. But it takes a team, and I had three surgical nurses who passed me instruments. I didn't even have to talk, and I had four physician assistants. So it went. Now I was a little more testy than normal.
Yeah.
One of the girls had a T-shirt made that said, "I survived Ernie Banks's knee replacements," but also I had to keep people away from bringing balls to Ernie because he was signing them, and I go, get away. He makes a living doing that. Leave him alone. But he enjoyed it, and it was a good experience for him.
Yeah.
It was a fun experience for me once I finished the surgery.
Yeah.
And I got to meet all the players. He was the manager of the old timer game at Minute Maid Park in Houston. And Jimmy Kimmel was the manager of the All Stars. I got to meet Jimmy Kimmel, and then I got to go down into the clubhouse, which I'd never been in a baseball stadium, and they have batting cages there. And Ernie was now in his early 70s, and this thing was going 90 miles an hour, and he
Yeah.
hit every single one. So he looks at me, he goes, "You try it, Dr. Goldstein." I go, "Okay." Well, the balls were past me before I could even pull the trigger. And he looked at me, goes, "Why are you playing like softball?" I go, well, that's all we played in the streets and in the parks in Chicago. So he goes, "You have to swing before the the uh, the ball is even launched, or even when the pitcher just has it. There's a movie, Fastball. You only have zero point 0.4 seconds to decide if it's a ball or a strike." So I
Yeah.
said, "How do you know if it's a ball or a strike?" And he said to me, he goes, "You know." I go, "How?" He goes, "You just know." And that's the difference. The hardest thing to do is hit a fastball, particularly now at 100 miles an hour.
Amazing.
Yeah,
All right. Well, like I said, I hope we can have more of these
sure.
episodes. Like I said, I think this just skims the surface. Um, you've had a great career. Continue to have a great career.
Hmm.
You've launched the careers of many doctors who are very much indebted to you, and you launched the career of yours truly, your brother, me.
Yeah.
What a wonderful ride this has been and continues to be. And so this podcast is really because of you. And that's why the website is Goldstein Group Practice,
Hmm.
because it's really, you're the Goldstein. I'm just the reporter. I
Okay.
So anyway, thank you very much.
Okay.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Group Practice.